The Mongols conquered more territory in 25 years than Rome did in 400. They had mobility, discipline, and a ruthlessness that terrified every kingdom from Korea to Hungary. Vietnam had none of that. What they had was something closer to what the Vietnamese used 700 years later: knowledge of the land, patience, and the willingness to do the boring, exhausting work that wins wars before they start. The night before the Mongols sailed into the Bạch Đằng River, Vietnamese soldiers were waist-deep in water, planting thousands of stakes in the mud. That's it. No battle cries, no speeches, just cold, methodical labor in the dark that turned the river into a graveyard by morning. Here's the question nobody asks. What does it feel like to work all night knowing you're building your own last stand? Because that's what they were doing, and what happened inside their heads that night might not have been courage at all. Let's back up. By 1287, Kublai Khan had tried twice to take Vietnam. In 1258, his general, Uryankadai, rolled in with 30,000 troops, took the capital, Thang Long, in 9 days and massacred the population. The Tran emperor ran. Then the heat came. Mongol soldiers, built for steppe winters, started collapsing in the tropical wet season. No supply line, no food, disease spreading through camp. They pulled out. Same thing in 1285. Prince Togan took Thang Long again with 70,000 regulars. But the Tran had burned the capital before they left, so there was nothing to loot, nothing to eat. Togan's deputy, Sogetu, was killed during the retreat. The Mongols controlled the cities, but couldn't hold them. Vietnam didn't beat them in pitched battle. They just outlasted them. That works once, maybe twice. But by December 1287, Kublai Khan was done playing. He sent Togan back with somewhere between 100,000 and 170,000 men, 500 warships, and 2 veteran admirals, Omar and Fan Yi. Omar had crushed the Song dynasty fleet. This wasn't a raid anymore. This was annihilation doctrine. So what do you do when the army that conquered most of the known world is coming back for the 3rd time with their navy? You don't meet them head on. You make the terrain do the killing. Trun Hung Dao, the Trun commander, had spent the previous campaigns watching how the Mongols moved. He knew they were unbeatable on open ground. He knew their ships were flat-bottom river barges built for Chinese waterways, not the tidal estuaries of northern Vietnam. And he knew one more thing. The Bạch Đằng River had a tidal range high enough to hide a forest of sharpened stakes twice a day. So starting in March 1288, he gave the order. Thousands of ironwood stakes, each tipped with a forged steel point, were driven into the riverbed at an angle. The work had to be done at low tide. That gave them maybe 6 hours a day. The rest of the time, the river rose and covered everything. We don't know exactly how many men did this. We don't know if they were soldiers or conscripted villagers. We don't know if they worked by torchlight or in complete darkness. What we do know is that by early April, the river was ready, and the Mongols had no idea. On April 9th, 1288, the trap was set. Small Vietnamese boats appeared at the river mouth and started harassing the Mongol fleet. Then they turned and ran upstream. Omar took the bait. His ships chased them into the Bạch Đằng at high tide when the stakes were hidden underwater. The Vietnamese kept retreating deeper into the river, burning time. Then the tide turned. The water dropped, and the Mongol warships, too heavy to maneuver in the shallows, began sinking onto the stakes. Hulls punctured, ships capsized, soldiers drowned or were cut down in the water. The battle lasted from dawn until sunset. 400 Mongol warships were destroyed. Omar was captured. Fan Yi was killed. It was the largest naval defeat the Mongol Empire ever suffered. Here's the kicker. That victory didn't happen because of what the soldiers did on April 9th. It happened because of what they did on April 8th and the nights before that, planting stakes in cold water for hours, knowing that if the Mongols found out, the whole plan collapsed. There's a state your brain can enter when survival is statistically unlikely, but the task in front of you is clear. It's not really bravery. It's more like acceptance with your hands still moving. Your amygdala, the part of your brain that screams danger, starts to quiet down. Your prefrontal cortex, which plans and worries, takes a back seat. What's left is task focus. One stake, then another. The body keeps working because stopping doesn't change the odds. Some researchers call it flow under duress. Others call it dissociation. Either way, it lets you do the impossible by no longer asking if it's possible. We talk about courage like it's a choice, like those soldiers decided to be brave and that made the difference. But I think courage is just what we call it when your brain stops arguing with reality and starts operating inside it. The Mongols had better weapons, more experience, an empire behind them. The Tran soldiers had mud, stakes, and one night to make it count, and they did. Not because they felt fearless, but because they stopped asking how they felt and just kept moving. That's not poetic, that's just biology, and it's the only reason April 9th ever happened. Dig into the sources yourself, link below. And if you want more on what happens when the brain stops fighting and starts functioning under impossible conditions, hit subscribe. We break down the biology behind decisions that shouldn't work, but do.